My guest today is Jamil Dhanani. Jamil is the founder of Gamma, the open marketplace for Bitcoin NFTs, powered, of course, by Stacks. Welcome to the show, Jamil.
Thanks so much for having me on, Andy. Great to be here.
Great to have you here. So, yeah, a few things to talk about today, Jamil. So, Gamma, as I understand it, is one of the leading marketplaces for creators and digital collectors to find, list, and sell and trade NFTs secured by Stacks on Bitcoin, which is very interesting. And I think you've just done a rebrand. So I'm sure we can talk about all of this. But before we do that, let's just have a little bit of an introduction for yourself. You've got an interesting background. Jamil, take it away. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks so much for the intro. My background is actually I'm an engineer by background, a computer engineer. Um, I had always dabbled in crypto, but it had never been my main thing. My first experience with crypto was around in 2014 when I first bought Bitcoin. But my professional background is actually mainly in machine learning. That's where most of my career was. I spent over 4 years at Apple working on machine learning for hardware on things like the Apple Watch and the AirPods. But over the past couple of years, I've been sort of following Bitcoin and Ethereum very closely. I bought Bitcoin, as I said, around in 2014, but I watched the development of smart contracts on Ethereum and the programmability. And that's when it really clicked for me what the power of crypto could do. Anybody could permissionlessly, deploy code, start their own financial protocol, fundraise for their startup, and do so much more. And that's where my passion sort of got solidified. And it was incredible to see when I came back and explored what was going on in Stacks. It was like coming home. It was seeing what had been possible on Bitcoin now that had been developed and sort of progressed on Ethereum since 2017. So that's sort of where I came from, a background in computer engineering, then moving into ML, but all the time just being very interested and very active in the crypto community before making it my full-time thing.
Yeah, very interesting, Jamal. And yes, I mean, you're right. So you did computer science at Stanford, I think, and you worked at Apple, as you've said, for some time as a senior machine learning engineer, and I think you worked on Siri as well. You probably have dabbled in AI. So perhaps we'll circle back and talk about some of this stuff towards the end of the show. Also, find it interesting that for a computer science guy, you've obviously, I suppose, discovered Bitcoin first. Well, this is 2014, so not too many of the kind of smart contract platforms were around in 2014. I think Ethereum was maybe just publishing the white paper in 2014. But you're right in that kind of that smart contract capability is what has unleashed a lot of certainly, well, DeFi, NFTs, all of the stuff that we think about when we think about Web3 today. But I find it interesting that you've, kind of approached it from a slightly different direction, Jamal, and that you've come back to Bitcoin and specifically Stacks. So I'd love it if maybe you can just talk about how you see Stacks as enabling that kind of smart contract functionality, but on Bitcoin, and why you've chosen to work and or support this particular ecosystem as opposed to Ethereum or one of the other smart contract platforms.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are two basic categories that I put that answer into. One is based on principle, and that's by far the most important reason. And when you look at what the blockchain and Nakamoto consensus fundamentally enables, it's a trustless way to manage your assets, that I am in full custody of my ownership. And that's the first time that that's happened in the digital world. We're so used to the physical world where if I hold something like my phone in my hand, I know I own it. I know it's mine. And in the digital world, we've grown up with a pattern where that's not the case. When you own something on Steam, you don't own it in the same way that you hold something in your hand. Steam can take it away from you at any point in time. when even when you have assets in an online bank or somewhere else, it really isn't fundamentally yours. And Bitcoin was the first step in making this possible in the digital realm and having Nakamoto consensus. No central authority can take that away from you. And when you think about that as the core of what crypto enables, it becomes clear why the protocol that you build on matters. The more centralized it is, like Solana or those other platforms, you're basically regressing to the old pattern just with the facade or surface of decentralization. So you might have, oh, I own NFTs on this platform, or I own that, but you're regressing to the previous pattern of the way things were before Bitcoin and before Nakamoto consensus. And smaller chains that are less decentralized, that have less distributed mining power, are more susceptible to breaking down, to having those security assumptions broken. And it doesn't matter until it really matters. And you notice that suddenly everything you thought you owned was gone. So this is why I think it's very important to build on a platform like Bitcoin, which is by far has the strongest security guarantees, is built on top of proof of work, which we know is tried, tested, and works. It has the most distributed miner population and miner commitment in terms of the hash power being distributed. And so to me, it's a no-brainer to use the security of Bitcoin. But as you know, and as the Ethereum founders knew, there are fundamental limitations to the UTXO model of Bitcoin. And so, and there are fundamental throughput limitations, like, for example, transaction throughput and the latency of block times. But what Lightning did, for example, was really smart. They built on top of the security of Bitcoin by saying, well, I can sign transactions and I can make commitments that can settle on the main Bitcoin blockchain at any time in a trustless way. And that enabled much faster throughput, much higher throughput, and much faster immediate settlement payments. And Stacks is trying to do the same and is doing the same for the programmable layer of Bitcoin. So I see Bitcoin as this like fundamental like base layer that we can build on our digital assets and our digital history on top of. And you have protocols like Lightning and Stacks that leverage that fundamental security to now enable this like explosion of different use cases and different assets and different types of applications on top.
Yeah, that is very well said, Jamel. So I suppose let's start to talk about Gamma then. So I think I said at the top of the show that you guys have undertaken a rebrand recently. So maybe we can start there. So well, let's start with yeah, like the Stacks community, right? So I'm a little bit familiar with the Stacks community. Regular listeners of the Crypto Conversation will have heard various guests come on the show from different parts of the Stacks ecosystem, and certainly some of the NFT communities as well. So perhaps we'll touch on some of those. But yeah, I mean, from my perspective as a kind of outsider looking in, yeah, the Stacks community, Jamel, it seems really, how do I describe it? It's welcoming, right? It's like it's small, but it's really enthusiastic and fun. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's what kept me building on Stacks actually. Initially, I came into the ecosystem, as I said, as someone who had been familiar with Bitcoin and Ethereum, but not Stacks. And one thing that I really appreciated was as soon as I started building, as soon as I started making things, as soon as I started contributing to the community, I just felt this warmth and acceptance from the community and a gratefulness for building things and feedback too. You build something and you get people using it and you get people providing feedback, you get people wanting to help, you get people wanting to contribute. And so I think that the most successful communities have that mindset. It's not one of criticism and negativity. It's one where you really feel that people want to help make things better. And I think that's where you see the most innovation and human progress, is when you have a community that just fundamentally is one of action, one of is not too ideologically entrenched, one that is open to new ideas, that is like basically both welcoming and I think open-minded.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Very well said, Jamel. All right, so Gamma. Tell us about what Gamma is, a little bit of the origin story, and bring us up to date on the rebrand and the thinking there.
Yeah, so initially when I first came to Stacks, the first tooling that I built was around the City Coins project, which you may have heard about. That being said, after building tooling for more City Coins related projects, I noticed that there was a big gap in the ecosystem, and that was in NFTs. And I think the fundamental core value proposition of Stacks is programmable Bitcoin. And one of the great things about smart contracts is you can enable ownership of assets that are not only fungible like Bitcoin, but non-fungible like art or membership or things like that that are individual assets. And most of the things in our life are fungible. I can't, exchange uh, something that I own, like a piece of art, for just another piece of art. It's unique and it holds value to me. And as a platform that's being built on Bitcoin, I think security of assets is paramount. Like this is like a fundamental use case for Bitcoin is securing your assets on it. And so if if we don't have a fundamentally strong base layer for securing our assets on Bitcoin, our non-fungible assets on Bitcoin, it limits the scope of the potential of what we can do in the future. So there were a few platforms for NFTs on Stacks, but they weren't very unified. They were, separate ones to the point where I just wanted to see all the NFTs that I owned on Bitcoin. And there was no way to do it, right? And that personally annoyed me, right? The fact that I couldn't do that. So I built a site to do it. And you could just type in like jamil.btc and I could see all the NFTs that I owned. And that was the first thing. It was just trying to make something useful. I felt there was a need. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't to like try and be extractive. It was just because I saw a gap and wanted to build on it. And the next problem that I sort of saw was that artists, when they were launching NFTs on Bitcoin, they were getting gouged. The existing platforms would charge them 30, 40% simply to launch their work. And that's unacceptable. Like if you're an artist, you're already paying, taxes on what you earn. You're already, struggling to get by sometimes, struggling to get your work out there. And to have a platform that takes 40% of that merely for showcasing your work is simply like, it's not right. And that's what motivated the first sort of marketplace functionality and NFT minting functionality. And so going from like a website that all it did was just show you your NFTs to launching collections by artists to eventually being the first open marketplace on Stacks where anybody could trade any NFT that they owned in their wallet is sort of how it started. Now the platform back then was called STX NFT. It sort of did what it says on the tin. It's a place to see your NFTs on Stacks. But as I mentioned, it's a lot bigger than this. When we talk about assets on Bitcoin, that's really where our goal is. And I see it as like a fundamental layer on top of which you can build so much more. And so we wanted to find a name and a brand that reflected those ambitions and values in a way that we could own and in a way people could understand. And so gamma is actually the third letter of the Greek alphabet, and it corresponds to the third basically evolution of the way the web has evolved. From Web 1, which is all about consuming content, to Web 2, which is about consuming and creating content, like in Facebook and Twitter and blogging services, to Web 3, which is about reading, about writing, and about owning as well. So it's like the read and write, and the read, write, and own pattern of Web 3.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, Jamal. And I have to ask, so since we're talking about Web 1, Web 2, and the current transition to Web 3 then, and, it's fascinating that you have this background as someone who's worked deep in the machine, talking about Apple, of course. And you talked about how when you first came to NFTs on Bitcoin and some of those early marketplaces would take 30 or 40%, which, of course, in a Web3 world is, just it's not it's not going to fly, right? But that, of course, is roughly. Remind me what the Apple App Store. What is their take rate? Somewhere around the 30% or
I
slightly
think it's
more.
20 or 30%, yeah, around for the in-app purchases. Right.
And what do you think about is that what's your opinion on that? I guess that kind of Web 2 model and how do you think Apple think about this stuff?
Well, I think the Web3 patterns are kind of fundamentally different in that you you take with you, for example, one decentralized identity, that's your wallet address that you can bring with you to different websites. It's very hard to create a walled garden ecosystem in Web3 because you can just take your wallet and go somewhere else. You have your assets, anybody can see them, anybody can read them, anybody can read your wallet state. You can interact with whatever smart contract you want. And I think it's actually been quite an interesting pattern in that, for example, even let's say Uniswap on Ethereum, it's just a smart contract, and might have different front ends that can interact with that smart contract in different ways. Nobody's locking you into using, Uniswap.org, and this is like so different from the way that we're used to. I don't think we've even wrapped our heads around the consequences of the way that this model exists and is formed. And so something like what Apple does right now is not something that I think would be possible in the current framework in Web3. It's almost not comparable, right? You can't say like Apple takes this much percent, so what would Web3 Apple do? Because it's a fundamentally different structure, a fundamentally different way of doing things. And you'll see different incentive structures come out. You'll see different ways of making money come out. And we've already seen that with tokenized communities, with um, uh, tokenized companies even. So I think I'm excited to see like not only the transition from like high to low commissions, which is one thing, it's almost like commissions to a completely different way of thinking about things, right? And completely different structures of organization.
Yeah, very much so. And well, speaking of different structures of organization, then I think that's kind of a nice way of talking about how we think about digital identity and the kind of the shift that is happening at the moment. And it's kind of happening in the background, I suppose, but very much in the foreground for those of us dabbling in the Web3 space, Jamel. But I guess I'm talking about this transition from a physical identity to a digital identity, which is now, of course, ownable and expressible at the individual level in these different new kind of virtual metaverse style worlds that we're building. So, yeah, I mean, feel free to kind of zoom out, but how do you think about the role that NFTs play in kind of enabling this new digital self that we're all starting to work on?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the earlier point about, I think what the blockchain and what NFTs enable is some of what we're used to in the physical world and that we take granted for in the physical world. In the physical world, I have control over my own body. I have control over my own sense of agency. I have control over the objects that I have in my house. I feel like an individual that has ownership, that has a sense of self. And on the internet, at least in the Web 2 patterns, it hasn't been like that. If I log into Facebook, Facebook owns me. It owns my account. It owns all the data in my account. I'm not my own person. I'm Facebook's person, or I'm Twitter's person. They use my information to extract stuff out of me, extract my money, to try to, essentially extract patterns so they can target ads to you. And so what I see is not so much like a separate digital identity that is almost extrinsic to oneself. It's basically like taking what we love about the physical world and now embodying those same values and principles of ownership and of identity and of sovereignty basically to the internet. And so I actually think a lot of what what digital assets enable can even be experiences and value in the physical world, and we're starting to see more and more of that. Just like, for example, in the past, you might have had your memberships or ownerships of physical things uh, stored in a Web2 way in a centralized database. Now you can also have your ownership, your memberships, your subscriptions also stored in a decentralized, in a strong way in which you actually own those things. So I'm not much of like a metaverse heavy person. I spend too much time at the computer already, and I don't want to spend more time on it. Um, but each to his own, right? And I think what crypto and blockchain enables goes so much further than that.
Yeah, nicely said, Jamal. I can certainly relate to that. Um, yeah, but like it or not, I guess the metaverse is coming, but I think it's on a much longer time frame than I think most people talk about today. But I'd love to understand then, Jamal. Let's just bring it back to reality where we are today in 2022 at the very early stages of Web3, just the very beginnings. Let's talk about user metrics. Just, that's an easy way to kind of understand how early all of this is. And, I believe you have a new person who is, I think, head of growth at Gamma. He is a friend of the crypto conversation. I'm talking about Brett, my old Aussie mate, old mate from Aussie, Mr. Eli Herf. Shout out Eli Herf, shout out Stacks Dads. I know you've brought him on, so the team is obviously growing, and your community is growing. I know there's new collections, new NFTs launching all the time at Gamma. So, if that's the context, what can we talk about in terms of those kind of growth or user metrics? Anything you can share as to what you're seeing at the moment? Because I understand also we're sort of suddenly in a bear market in NFTs and in crypto, so that will be impacting things as well. So just, what have you seen in the journey so far, Jamal?
Yeah, there have been a few things that I think very exciting. One that Brett, for example, has tremendously helped out with is, I think, the core of any marketplace is not, it's not us, right? The marketplace exists only to show artists and to help collectors and creators connect with each other, buy each other's work. It's almost like a central bazaar, right? When you come to like a market or something, you never think about, oh, like who built this building, or like who made the like hallways or whatever, right? It's all about the people that you're showcasing, the people that you're interacting with, the stores, the artists, the artisans, and it's the same on an NFT marketplace. And one thing that Brett has helped out tremendously with is bringing those artists onto Stacks and onto Bitcoin and getting their first Bitcoin NFTs minted. And I think that's really like the soul of the marketplace. And so we've seen over 500 collections deployed with our self-service portal, which allows artists basically without an engineer, without any coding experience, to deploy their NFT collection in a way that they actually own. And this goes back to the principles that I was talking about earlier. Most websites like OpenSea, when you mint an NFT, they're minting it to their own smart contract. They actually own your NFT, essentially, own the management of your NFT. And I don't feel that's right. I think artists should be able to have ownership over their collections. And the way this has normally been done before is with is you'd have to hire an engineer or a team of engineers to write the smart contracts, to do all the metadata work, to do all of the airdrop or mint pass or whatever. And so we've tried to make that as easy as possible. In an ideal world, I want to get rid of my job. I'm an engineer. This is what I do. I code, but I want artists to be able to do that without my help. And so we've seen a huge take rate in artists, really appreciating this ability to own their collections, to be able to launch their collections in a way that they don't need a team of engineers to do so. And actually, I think when you look at the number of smart contracts on Stacks, they're about 5,000 or so. And so we've had 500 artists launch their smart contracts with us. That's 10% of the smart contracts that exist on Stacks are from artists creating their collections with Gamma. So then that's the first thing is like, if you don't have the artist, you don't have anything. So that's the first aspect. We've also had about 4 to 5 thousand people starting to trade, buy, sell their assets on Gamma. So it's not like a Coinbase number or something like that, but it's a decent sized community that's just growing every day. People that find value to this. And one last statistic that I think is very interesting is out of these 5,000 or so buyers, we have about 35,000, 40,000. I don't, last time I checked, the number was a little while ago, but these buyers are coming back. So they're not just buying one NFT, they're actually buying over 6 NFTs per user. So people really enjoy the experience. They enjoy, having that security of Bitcoin. They enjoy the art that's coming out of these platforms. And I think that's like demonstrates that it's not just like someone buying an NFT or doing a free mint and leaving. It's people that are coming and staying. And it's a testament to both the Bitcoin and Stacks community as well.
I love it. I love it, Jamal. All right. Well, you know, I guess as we start to finish off this part of the podcast, talk to me. Do you think there's like a kind of particular vibe or style and within the kind of the NFT culture on Stacks, if that makes sense? And I imagine as it kind of rolls out and you get more and more artists, fine art, photography, profile pics, and kind of everything in between, everything starts to get wider and wider, and as everything becomes influenced by each other from other chains as well. But of course, at the moment, do you think is there a particular style that you can kind of see within Stacks NFT communities?
I didn't quite realize how incredible the diversity of the art and the styles were on Stacks until I actually was on a panel at Web3 Week a week or two ago, and there was a Solana oriented panel, and then they were talking about all of these collections on Solana, and it was funny because they were saying, oh, I bought this one and flipped it 2 days later, and they're all the same. They like are all the same art style. Though they're all the same, targeting the same group of people, which are people that want to buy into a project early and flip it 2 days later for profit, right? And so what you get is a convergence of work into like one style that everybody thinks is going to make them money. And if you go to like Magic Eden or one of those platforms, you scroll down, it's like all homogenous. And it's not because people like the art. They'll just find, copy paste things to just make because they know it'll make the money. And I didn't quite realize the extent to which that was true because I had been used to building, these artists on Bitcoin where they're really like, I think it sounds cliche, but it's true. I think they're actually in it because they love what they do. And you sort of see this when even Brett, is talking to these artists. There's an incredible diversity of people that have their own existing hobbies or passions, like photography or music. Like for photography, there's this great guy called Levi who goes on, trips to the, American West or Alaska and takes photos and then mints them on Stacks. And it's like an expression of his personality and his sense of adventure. And then you have a music teacher, Sean, who will sing these songs and like make these pieces and then auction them off. Like it comes from the heart, right? And you see that in the diversity of the art that we see on Stacks. It's not just those copycat collections, even the profile picture collections like Megapon. I'm very close with the founder. He's like very in it for the long term, very creating something that is like a strong community, a group of friends that, come together. And so I think the types of stuff that you've seen on Stacks have been much more diverse and much more interesting than what you see on other platforms that are even much more mature and much larger. And actually after that panel where they were just talking about flipping and making money and like which like dragon bear project is like the top one of the day, I'm like I don't even want to be here, right? I want to be in this place where people just love what they do and are putting their heart into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Jamal. And after I suppose, observing and in some ways, contributing to NFT space for a year or so. It's easy to become burned out. It's easy to become disillusioned, and I think the only way forward. I mean, I guess flippers will flip, and if you're a flipper, good luck to you. But really, for most people, and certainly for, if this thing is going to be kind of adopted on a much more mainstream basis, I think really the way to get involved with Web3 communities and NFTs is people, they just need to find their tribe, find a community that speaks to them and they can get involved with, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to be buying into all these new mints and then trying to sell them and flip them. It's just, yeah, it's just,
Yeah, I mean,
it's too much.
I the way I think about it is when you look at history and you look at the people that both have made the biggest impact, that are happiest, that we remember in the past, are those that made long-term commitments, long-term bets, and those that really focused on what their values were. If we go back to the 1980s or 1990s and we think about stock traders that were flipping Apple and Amazon stocks back then. They probably thought they were like hot shit back then and, riding in their, Rolls Royces or whatever. But someone who just bought an Apple or Apple stock in, 1980 or Amazon stock in what, 1999 or 2001 or something, and just held and didn't worry about it because they believed in the company and they believed in the cause. Those are the people that actually made it, right? And the people that made a dent in the universe are those that built those companies. It's not the people that figure out like, oh, where can I flip? Where can I make the most profit today and tomorrow? It's the power of compounding on something for a long time, and the values that you believe in. And even those that didn't build companies and invested in art or invested in these things and built museums or built public institutions or built a legacy beyond that. It's people who are making these long-term commitments and not just buying to sell it for 100% profit the next year.
Again, couldn't agree more, Jamel. Really nicely said. And it's just hard for people, I guess, particularly younger people, if they're just coming into NFTs and they're just used to this incredibly fast-paced online, always online, social media, TikTok kind of world. So it's hard for them maybe to think in kind of, multi-month timelines, let alone kind of multi-year, low time preference kind of Bitcoin investor timelines, of which I think is what you're talking about. I love also that you slipped in, I'm sure some astute listeners would have noticed that you slipped in a Steve Jobs quote there, I think, Jamel, did you?
If I did, might be unintentional. Which one was it?
But
The dent in
that
the
was Steve
universe.
Jobs. You said you talked about putting a dent in the universe.
Yes, yeah, that one is a Steve Jobs quote. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You can take the what's the saying? You can take the I guess the computer science guy out of Apple, but I think a little bit of that Steve Jobs soul will always stay with you, right?
Well, I think that there's a certain group of people that you grow up admiring, right? The people that you see making a difference, the people that you see that hold true to their values, and whether it's Warren Buffett or Steve Jobs or whatever. As I mentioned, all of these people have something in common, which is making those long-term value investing. Not only for Warren Buffett, it was value investing in companies. For Steve Jobs, it was value investing in technology and people. And it really is it is really just about that. And I see the same thing for NFTs right now. Is if you look at it in the 1 2 year time frame, which NFTs have really been popular for, you might look at like a couple feet ahead, right? And you're like, okay, this is where we are now. But fundamentally, as I mentioned earlier, NFTs are a way of building a new asset class, a new digital asset class, fundamentally changing the way that the internet works. And when you look at it in that picture, it just becomes everything on like the day and month level seems trivial, right? Everything on the day and month level is like, you're not just here to make a profit, right? They're great people that are building amazing artwork, that are contributing to the protocol and contributing to the technology every day. That compounds over time to make something that really makes a meaningful difference in the future. And so that's sort of the way I see it, and when you look at the people that you sort of grow up admiring, or the people that have made a difference, you just see that.
Yeah, couldn't agree. Excuse me, couldn't agree more, Jamal. And just as well, I said we'd finish off this part of the podcast, so let's finish it off. I can't resist, I guess, just giving you the opportunity again to speak about this, just because I think it's interesting, because you have that kind of computer science background. So you kind of talked a little bit, Jamal, about how some other chains, some other NFT platforms are indulging in, I don't know, I wouldn't put words in your mouth, but maybe, decentralization theater,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I think we all know what you mean. Seen the compromises that a chain like Solana might make, which is kind of a major differentiation from something like Bitcoin's proof of work, obviously. So what am I saying here? I guess I'm just saying, there's so much going on in crypto, but if a lot of it is, as we say, decentralization theater, or a lot can go wrong. We've seen the kind of the Terra Luna event from a month or so ago. There's lots happening in crypto, but not all of it is going well, I guess, is what I'm saying. So from your perspective as a kind of computer science guy, what are you worried about? What gives you hope? And yeah, what do you think sort of happens over the next decade or so? I know this is just hugely big picture speculative stuff, but just interested in your kind of top of mind thoughts.
Yeah, first of all, I I know I was critical of Solana, but I don't want to become too negative about experimentation and about trying new things, because I think it's early on in a technology, you can criticize 99% of what's out there and you'll be right. If we were here in 1999 and talking about the internet, I could talk I could, say, 99% of these companies will fail in 2 years, and I would have been right. Right. But that doesn't mean that the internet doesn't make a difference. And the 1% of companies that come out of it don't fundamentally change the world. Right. And I think I always use this metaphor too of like, uh, in 1903, when the Wright brothers first, I'm a big aviation nerd, so I like to think in those terms. When they invented the airplane, it was like this fabric, canvas aircraft with two wings. And over the next few years, you saw these, explosion of different types of aircraft. You saw the Germans working on Zeppelins, like these, incredible machines that were designed to take people across oceans. You saw people on, these incredible like ground effect vehicles and like a whole slew of different technologies. But 50 years later, we settled down into like the jet plane, right? And that sort of has been the stable state of things for 50 plus years. And I grew up in grade school with the age of like early cell phones, right? And I remember in class, everybody had a different type of cell phone, right? There were some that you like flipped up the keyboard. There were some that like the Motorola Razr was really popular. The Blackberries with the physical keyboards were very popular. And similarly, you saw this explosion of ideas and of possibilities, and 99% of them failed. And now we all have phones, whether you're Android or iOS or whatever, they all look like this, right? They're all flat slabs of glass. And so what excites me the most is we are in that point right now in crypto, right? We're in that, Zeppelins and crazy ideas phase, or Motorola Razr and Sidekick phase of crypto, where a lot of these ideas will fail, right? But what matters is that we try new things and we experiment and we figure out what will work and what doesn't, how we can benefit people in the biggest way, and how we can make the biggest impact on people. And what I'm interested in most in crypto is exactly that, how you can facilitate the biggest user experience, the biggest impact, and provide the most good to people. And for me personally, that's in decentralized asset ownership. In bringing this physical idea of, yes, I can own something in the physical world, I should be able to own something in the digital world. That's where I want to keep building. And I think we've only scratched the surface of what that means. It won't just be monkey pictures in the future, It's a fundamentally like different way of thinking about ownership on the internet.
Yeah, I knew you'd have a fantastic perspective, and I wasn't wrong. So I enjoyed that. Thank you, Jamal. And look, shout out to the Motorola Razr. Man, I had one of those, and I think that was the first phone, or kind of, yeah, a really it was a really sexy piece of hardware at the time, and I think yeah, a lot of people loved that phone. You're an aviation nerd, yeah. I mean, I kind of knew that. I think I knew that you are a an enthusiastic pilot. Jamal, have you seen Top Gun Maverick?
No, I haven't yet, though it's on my list.
Oh man, see,
I've
make
heard
sure you.
really good things about it.
Oh, it's such a good film. I was actually surprised. I saw it in a theater, and shout out Tom Cruise. But it's what kind of one of those first, big blockbuster film that, yeah, you can kind of feel how it's manipulating your emotions the whole way through the movie. But oh, they do such a good job with everything, the music, the cinematography, acting. It's just fun. Incredible movie. Very much recommend it. But now, viewers and listeners, it is time to go to a very super quick break, and then we will come back. We'll have some fun. We'll finish off and run Jamal through the very famous Crypto Conversation Hot Take Round. All right, we are back, and if you're watching on YouTube, we never left. I'm with Jamil Dhanani. Jamil is the founder of Gamma, the open marketplace for Bitcoin NFTs powered by Stacks. Jamil, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
Good. Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. No right or wrong way to do this, Jamal. Just going to throw some questions at you. Hit me with your best shot. Question one is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I think the future will have a small number of chains. I think more chains are good for experimentation, but as I mentioned, security is important, and you can't forget that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion, Jamal?
Crypto opinion. I think it goes back to that security point that it isn't about just the user experience, or it isn't just uh, about how fast your transactions are or how many transactions that you can put through. Where you build on matters, and the decentralization and the mining capacity, the mining distribution matters.
Yes, indeed. All right. Bill Gates famously said, Jamal, that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So I'm sure, as someone who spent a number of years at Apple, you'll very much relate to that. But with that in mind, I guess Bitcoin, blockchain, stacks, NFTs, whatever, what does it all look like in 10 years' time?
I think what's exciting about crypto is, just like in 1903, if you ask the Wright brothers what would aviation look like in 10 years' time, they have no clue. They invented something great, but they wouldn't have thought where things would end up now. And I think it's the same with Bitcoin in 2008. I don't think, Satoshi Nakamoto, when he published that paper, would imagine what happened with, smart contracts or any of that. So I think now I have an idea of the principles that I want to build on, right? Of decentralized asset ownership, of fundamentally different internet. But I would be lying if I said this is exactly what it's going to look like in 10 years.
Absolutely. All right. Well, the flip side of all of this, of course, is a quote by William Gibson, who said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, Jamal, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that we possibly take for granted is the ability to, for example, like, I attribute my education to an incredible amount of, what I'm capable of right now. But I still went through the traditional education system, with the universities and things like that. But this is accessible to so many more people than one realizes. And I think I would love to see more of that come to different countries, come to different different social classes, different, just make that more accessible. I think everybody has the ability to make a huge impact on the world. There's so much negativity out there today of like complaining about things and figuring, the world isn't how I want it to be. We can all make it better, and everybody has the power to. It's just finding the right tools and finding the right means to do so. And I think often when you come from a background that's more traditional, you feel more empowered to do so because you maybe grew up with professors or whatever reinforcing that. But I think enabling more people to have that empowerment, have that confidence to learn and to make an impact is going to be very important in the future.
Absolutely, very nicely said. Look, Jamil, you're a Bitcoiner, you're a Stacks guy, but you're a Bitcoiner. One of the big emerging narratives, of course, around Bitcoin is this idea of energy use via proof of work and Bitcoin mining. We're seeing a lot of pushback against that. The flip side of course is always also true. There's champions for the Bitcoin mining renewable energy argument. But yeah, do you what's your thoughts on kind of the push and pull and the tension here with this incredible climate change, the planet is burning a narrative from so many people around the world. And look, it's probably actually true. The planet is getting warmer. We do have a major climate change problem. How can a kind of proof of work exist going forward in that context?
Yeah, I mean, I feel very strongly about conservation and of protecting the climate and protecting the earth. As I said, I don't want to spend my time in the metaverse. I want to spend my time outdoors, hiking, skiing, climbing mountains. That's what I love, right? Being in the forest, being with nature, and it's a paramount priority for me. That being said, I think one of the one of the things is Nakamoto consensus is still really the only way that we're confident that we can achieve these values of decentralization, of ownership in a way that's secure. And nothing in this world gives us a free lunch. No matter what we do, we expend energy doing it, whether it's making food or driving transportation somewhere. And I don't think we fully come to terms with the fact that in order to achieve this ownership, this decentralization, some of these principles that we need to build the future on, there are also costs associated with it. There are costs, to mine these to mine blocks. There are costs to there are environmental costs to it. There are energy costs to it. And I think what we need to do is when we say I need to get from point A to point B, we say what's the most energy efficient way I can do that? I can use a train, I can use a car, but we don't say just abandon the goal altogether. Humans shouldn't travel, right? We know our goals. We know we need to get from point A to point B. We know we need to achieve strong decentralization. Now the question is, okay, what's the cleanest energy that I can use to mine Bitcoin? How can I use proof of work in the most energy efficient way? But I think it's almost intellectual laziness to try to abandon it altogether and just say, hey, well, we can, it's bad for the environment, so don't do it. It's a very like regressive way of thinking. I think a more progressive way is to figure out how do we achieve those goals in the best way possible. And I don't believe proof of stake is it. I don't believe Solana's centralization is it. I really think we've got to find the best way to do it with the most secure consensus mechanism that we know exists.
I love it. Wonderfully said, Jamil. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that. I'm sure the listeners did too. And really, it's we can't, if you're not going to make a moral judgment about things like everything from, clothes dryers to hair dryers or, yeah, like jet flights, then yeah, it's kind of the same, I guess, with Bitcoin mining. But I think you said that much more eloquently and articulately than I could, Jamil. All right, time to start to finish off. Time to zoom out. Time to get a little bit weird for a second. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race, Jamil? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I think in recent history, I also grew up watching, Star Trek and these old school science fiction movies, 2001: A Space Odyssey and stuff like that. And, the picture that they paint in the future is always of one where humanity has done well for itself, right? Where people are at peace generally, people are, progressing for the future of humanity, for the future of civilization. And I think in the past decade or two, maybe even like past few decades, you sort of seen that flip a little bit, and you see the future being portrayed much more darkly. People tend to get much more pessimistic. You have much more of a Black Mirror view of the future. And I think it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Alan Kay said the best way to predict the future is to invent it, right? So it's not something that is predestined. We can have either of them. It's our choice, right? It's in each of our hands to determine how the future of humanity progresses. And I think if we keep having this pessimistic view of one of dystopia, that is what's going to happen. But if we stay positive and build the future we want to build, if we envision a future that we is aligned with our values and that we believe in, we will get there.
Absolutely. Wonderfully said again. All right, let's close this out, Jamil. Finally, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, TV show, or universe?
That's a good question considering I just mentioned it in the previous one. I
Yeah.
know it's kind of a cliche, but I do really like uh, those two series, like Star Trek and 2001, even though it's like probably the most cliched answers you could give to either of those questions. But it's for a good reason. Though they're great, great narratives, great stories, and also project a vision for humanity, which I think is incredibly positive and incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely, my man. We need that positivity, and yeah, so nothing wrong with some good old fashioned utopian sci-fi. Yeah, shout out to Star Trek, the original. All right, this has been excellent, Jamal. I've very much enjoyed talking everything from Apple, NFTs, stacks, Bitcoin, Gamma, everything with you today. Nothing else to say except to hand the metaphorical microphone back to your good self. Take us out. Please tell the people where they can go to find you on Twitter or wherever else you like to hang out online, and of course where they should go if people want to learn more about what you guys are building with Gamma.
For sure. So the website is gamma.io for the Bitcoin NFT marketplace that's built on stacks. My personal the Gamma Twitter handle is at trygamma, so twitter.com/trygamma. And my personal Twitter account is at Jamil BTC, JAMIL BTC.
Awesome. This one was a pleasure. Really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks very much, and bye for now.
Thanks so much, Andy. Bye.
All right, there you go. That was Jamal from Gamma. That was a good one. Really, I really enjoyed talking to Jamal and some great perspectives. So thank you to the team at Gamma. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, Eli Hirth. Thank you to the wonderful Stacks community. And yeah, I guess we reach the end of another show. All right. Well, thank you, listeners, for listening here at the end of the show. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Please don't forget to subscribe to the Crypto Conversation so you know when each exciting new episode drops. Yeah, but that is us for today. We're out of here. Thanks, team. See you real soon. See you next time. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Kind.